on those immediate lands.
Mr. Pierce?
In terms of specific precedents, we didn't find any for this type of development. The decision to taper from 4 stories to 2 was predominantly driven by a desire to maintain a less intrusive impact on the surrounding community, to retain views from 25th, tapering down to the lake. There are certainly, it's certainly less economically viable to produce smaller buildings with less floor area as land values go up. It's something that we could look at in terms of looking at the potential of extending the 3rd story form towards lakelands, but that would be potentially at the cost of just that compatibility question with the surrounding, predominantly 2-story residential form. That's something maybe perhaps we could follow up on specifically in the recommendation report.
Thank you. Yes, if you would take that one away and come back and perhaps put that in the report that council will be debating. Councillor Waters, did you have another one?
That's everything. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Fowler?
I have 2 questions. Just something that I'm going through the report, and it seems to be a consistent theme that's coming along right now. I'm going to read some of the points here from page 2 of the report. Says, for the proposed zoning provisions to be put into effect on the 5 Lake Simcoe adjacent lots, an amendment to the shoreline bylaw is needed to remove the properties from the shoreline bylaw. On page 3, because the zoning bylaws and community planning permit systems serve similar purposes in regulating development, it is not desirable to have 2 sets of regulations in affecting a single property. The proposed amendment would update mapping on Schedule A of our shores, removing the properties from regulation under our shore to allow the regulations proposed in the zoning bylaw amendment to be applied. And page 7, to reflect the protection established through our shore, informed by policies of Lake Simcoe Protection Plan, numerous provisions related to the protection of Lake Simcoe have been incorporated into the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. It just seems to be that we have our shores in place. What it's supposed to do, and now we're looking to excise these 5 properties to replace it with something that does almost an identical thing to it. Like, I don't see the, I'm kind of confused why, if something is working, we're taking it out to replace it with something that does the same thing. It seems a little redundant. I don't comprehend the reasoning behind it. If you could explain that, please. That's one question, and I have a follow-up after.
Thank you, Councillor Fowler. Yeah, so a lot of the discussion around the official plan was done prior to you being on council. So maybe, Mr. Pierce, you could just step back a little bit for members of council that were not here for the official plan amendment.
Sure. At the beginning of this exercise, we had to decide whether we're going to incorporate a mixed use development type within our shore, or whether we're going to do what we propose now, which is pull it out and put it into the zoning. The simple answer is that the existing zoning bylaw already had that framework in place to regulate the shoreline. The definitions were there. There was already a structure to regulate mixed use development. Our shore carried forward a lot of the existing zoning bylaw provisions, is a better way to think of it. So if we were to do the inverse and introduce a mixed use development type into our shore, it would pose a challenge, because we would really be potentially writing whole new chapters for that document, because it's really scoped in to provide a development framework for single family dwellings on the lake, and doing it well. It's something that could be done, and it's something we actually might be looking at doing in the future. There are plans in place, projects in place to look at development permit systems throughout Innisfil. But it's really more of a simplicity argument. We could do it much simpler and have the same outcome through the zoning bylaw. And one other thing I would add is there are several properties, there's not many of them, along the waterfront that aren't actually under our shore. So you might think of Friday Harbor. Friday Harbor isn't regulated by our shore. And I think most of the examples are actually what are known as tourist commercial. It's actually pretty comparable to what is being conceived here.
Councillor Fowler?
Yes, just one second one. On page 8, it's something that kind of stuck out to me. Again, maybe I'm not seeing the big picture here, or I'm not understanding the logic behind it. Lakelands Avenue has been identified specifically for potential streetscape enhancements, including potential for a neighborhood pedestrian entrance. Anybody who knows Innisfil Beach Park, you can go through the basketball court, you can walk halfway down to where the parking lot is to the baseball diamond, you can walk to the front entrance. This, to me, again, seems to be a redundant feature that's been put into place. Why, when we have so many entrances, is this being added? Like, a majority of the development, I can see the logic behind it, but when it comes to MU 3-4 mixed use, it's just I'm getting a lot of conflicting information. I'm just wondering what the reasoning behind that particular addition would be. Please and thank you.
Mr. Pierce.
So the reason for the idea of a road closure, I think the best way to think of it is the pedestrian gateway at Lakelands would effectively be a road closure for vehicles. And that came about through the Innisfil Beach Park Master Plan, looking at some of the problems that we knew we had with traffic backing up at that roundabout. So the thinking in the plan is when changes are made to Innisfil Beach Road, there would be improvements to the roundabout, stacking lanes, space potentially for a gateway or a sort of a gated entrance for payment. And we knew that if that was going to be explored, and we knew that there was a fairly long history of discussing a gated entrance there, that we would have to manage people exiting through Lakelands Avenue. So that's where that came from. It does pose challenges to fitting parking and vehicle access to some of those mixed-use 3 properties. Actually, one of the ideas that came out of the February open house, the neighborhood open house, was the idea of providing some public parking in close proximity to the corner at the roundabout, so that people can arrive there, park in the park, walk to the ICB, the downtown extension, and visit the restaurants on Lakeland if it were to move forward in that way. There would also have to be accessible parking directly on Lakelands. So that's a bit of a context, and it's a perfect example of how the Innisfil Beach Park Master Plan meshes quite tightly with the ICB.
Thank you. Is that all, Councillor? Councillor Sadi.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just finding my mute button there. Several questions. Galen, thank you for the presentation. And in the document, some of the councillors have already covered some of the areas. Just going on your comments on the Our Shore policy, for the homes that are on Lakelands Avenue, staff's recommendation that if that went through, there would have to be an amendment to the Our Shore policy to change it to allow that area to become a mixed-use commercial MU 3-4 zone. I didn't see anything in the report, and would this be done later, where Lake Simcoe Region Conservation fits in that on their input? Is that something that staff would be obtaining in input in a report to council, or when would we learn about that? So that's my first question, and I'll let you answer that before I go on to the others. Thank you.
Mr. Pierce.
All right, yep, certainly. So the shoreline bylaw amendment text is in attachment 3, and it does talk about pulling those properties out. We have circulated to the CA, and we haven't heard back from them yet. They have commented on the Innisfil Beach Park Master Plan, but when we come back with the recommendation report, we'll include the CA's comments.
Okay, and then follow up on that. So that's pending on that. So they may even say that they're not in favor of it, which could change all that. And while we're on that one, when this comes back, because council is not voting on this tonight, just as the mayor has advise residents watching and those ready to speak. So council's not, we're asking questions for clarifications. We're not debating and we're not voting tonight. We're just here to listen to residents. But when that comes back in the staff report after tonight and all the comments taken, will council be able to have the option to split this voting on this from removing the mixed use 4 zone, which is the 5 houses on Lakelands, from the rest of Innisfil Beach Road, so that council could debate this in 2 different sections. 1, the homes on Lakelands, and 2, the mixed use commercial on IBR. Will that be an option for council?
Mr. Pierce?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, that's exactly what the approach will be from planning staff. So on page 10, we overview the 3 options that we're going to focus on. That might change if based on what we hear tonight from residents. But what I would like to do is bring the bylaw that we have in its refined form, and we would be bringing a second bylaw potentially, removing those Lakelands properties, and it would be ready essentially to be adopted that night. There is a time crunch around the ICB, so we're going to try to provide you with all those options.
Okay, thank you. And I just have 2 other questions, Your Worship, just the quick ones.
Could I just do a little bit of follow up on that question, if you don't mind, Councillor, and just while we're on that topic. So if that were the case, and if council chose that route, but those properties on Lakelands are still identified or designated in the official plan as mixed use, would that not leave them open for, somebody coming in with a 20-story application? Mr. Pierce?
Yeah, I can try to answer that, and Mary Nordstrom may jump in on it. It's not ideal, but it's not uncommon to have a bit of a disconnect between the official plan and the zoning bylaw. Ideally, they're all lined up. What we would likely do is schedule, if the decision is to walk away from the 5 Lakelands properties, we would probably schedule in an update to update the official plan, whether that's at a future comprehensive review or whether that's a direction from council specifically to open it up and make the amendment on its own.
Thank you. Ms. Nordstrom, did you have anything to add?
And no, through you, Mayor, no, not unless there's further questions from Councillor Asadi, but I think Galen answered.
Thank you. And for those watching, I just want to introduce Mary Nordstrom. She's fairly new with the town and she's our manager of planning. Okay, sorry, Councillor Asadi, to get off base there. I just want to cover that while we were having that discussion.
No, I think that's, thank you, Worship. I think that's good for council as well, because my assumption is that there would have to be an amendment back on our official plan, changing that to protect exactly what you said. But I'd be looking for that in, as information for staff to have that background information able to report back on that. And just one other thing, in the report, it talks about 2015 background study on retail space vacancy, 2%, office space 0%. Is all the data in that report from 2015?
Mr. Pierce? Or
I would actually turn to Paul Pentakeen to field that question.
Okay. And then just one final thing on the slides that you had shown tonight, Mr. Pierce, showing the mapping here for the mixed use 1, zone 1, 2, 3, and 4. Your slides for 3 and 4, just on the top for clarification, if you're going to put it on the town website, displayed MU32 for all the slides in the top bar. So just if you're putting it on the town website so that people don't get confused when we're looking at those zones. And I think that covers mine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Pentakeen.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. If I heard the question correctly, it was just the basis of the discussion paper from 2015. That was done as part of the Our Place process. So that was one of the series of background discussion papers. And that would have been based on that 2015 date.
Thank you. Any other, Councillor Payne?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Galen, for your presentation as well. Just looking at the map here, the whole length of that lot has been taken by these stores and whatever. The properties that are backing onto the stores or the complex, whatever you want to call them, off of Lakeland, the backyards, how is that going to affect those neighbors? And like you're saying that the parking will be at the back. So is that going to be taking property from the people that are living on Lakelands, or how is that going to affect that? Or is it if there going to be fencing put up for them to give them their privacy? I'd just like to know how that's going to work.
Thank you, Mr. Pierce.
Sure. I'm putting on my development planner hat for this. But typically what we do is we throw every tool we have at it. So we will, manage speed in the back parking lots. We will put up privacy fencing that doesn't permit light to go through. We will beef up landscape plantings along the rear lot line. In fact, the proposed zoning bylaw tonight specifies dense vegetation and high caliper size vegetation. And then the last thing is a bit of an overlook issue that often comes up with some of the mixed use developments that we've seen on Innisfil Beach Road. And that's where the angular plane zoning tool comes in, and I believe does a really good job. So what that does is as a building gets higher, it steps back from that rear lot line. So when you're in your backyard and you're looking up at these buildings, they have a significantly reduced visual impact. There's more sky to be seen. So when you put all these pieces together and you give some time for the vegetation to fill in, those are essentially the best practices for placing mixed use development near low density development.
Thank you. Did you have a follow-up, Councillor Payne?
Yes, thank you. So with that being said, there's no loss of property from the residents off of Lakelands?
No, sorry. No, generally, if you look at the map, actually, I believe everyone can see on the screen, the properties in red cut that block in half. So any of the properties to the south, I believe almost all of them, come right up and end at that bottom red line. So the only properties that would be affected are those ones generally on Innisfil Beach Road. Maybe I don't understand the question.
The one on Haight, I think the councillor was referring to Hastings.
Oh yeah, sorry, on Hastings.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Davidson, and then we best go to our very patient commenters.
Thank you, Worship. With Councillor Payne's point of view there, we've often seen, there's a lot of mature trees in those backyards. I was down that way about 2 weeks ago. So a lot of mature trees in existence. What we have with developers is they'll go in and accidentally cut these mature trees down and rather pay a fine than leave the trees because of the impact they have on the development. We see that all the time. So is there some precaution we can put in there that on those existing lots, those large trees, and may there be butternut or any environmental protection area that because of those trees, what's habitat is there is protected?
Mr. Pierce?
Yeah, so this actually gets at an important point. So the zoning process sets those ground rules for development, but it's really the site plan process on commercial properties that gets into the detail, the nitty gritty in terms of how the site is affecting trees, how the site is affecting water on the site, how much soil is permeable. So all of that would happen through the site plan process. Right now, we do have a set of rules in place for compensation for removed trees, and they're fairly stringent and based on caliper, the size of the tree. But I myself am actually beginning the first stages of the urban forest master plan or management plan for the town of Innisfil. So in the next year, we could see those rules be enhanced.
Thank you. Any final burning questions before we go to the public? Seeing none, thank you, Council. We'll now hear from those who have questions and comments regarding the proposed amendments. The speaking order is now on the screen. When it's your turn, you'll have 5 minutes to express your questions or concerns, and town staff will be capturing your comments as we progress. Once your 5 minutes are up, please turn off your video and audio, and we'll call on the next speaker's name. Once all speakers on the list have spoken, I'll ask for any additional speakers. And at that time, if you have something else you'd like to add, please turn on your video and raise your hand, and I'll call on you just as you've seen us here doing this evening as members of council. You'll have an additional 5 minutes if that's required. During the meeting, once you have provided comment, you can either stay on the YouTube or the Zoom meeting, turn off your audio and your video, but you may stay on and listen to the rest of the meeting. Or if you'd like, you can leave the meeting and watch it on our YouTube live stream, whichever you're most comfortable with. I'll now ask the first person on the list, Sally Stanley, to please turn on your video and audio and state your full name for the record, and we'll get started.
Okay, it says okay because it, okay.
We can hear you, but we haven't got your video.
I'm starting my video. Sorry.
Okay.
Because they turned it on.
Oh, apparently the video's turned off according to what I'm hearing. The host has stopped it.
Okay.
Okay, I'll start it again.
There you are. Welcome, and thank you for your patience. Whenever you're ready, Mrs. Stanley, and I'll start the clock here. And I understand you might have some slides to share.
No, not me. That is Michael Stanley.
Oh, okay. Okay. Whenever you're ready.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here today to urge council not to rezone the 5 waterfront lots on Lakelands and to return their land use designation to their original residential designation. And this will require an amendment to the official plan. Given my limited time to present, I'm going to make a few key points as food for thought. The staff report of June 17th, which Mr. Pierce just gave, speaks to a shortage of retail and office space in Innisfil as justification for the rezoning, predicting a retail sector demand for 1.1 million square feet by 2031. However, as mentioned, it's 2015 data. The reason for the vacancy is because of all the empty commercial zoned lots that already exist on Innisfil Beach Road without buildings on them. Until developers start to build on them, the vacancy rates are not going to change for the town. Why will they want the 5 waterfront lots on Lakelands Avenue? These properties are the least desirable option for commercial use. Customer traffic drops off sharply east of the 25 side road, and population in the area isn't going to grow enough to support the economics for a land developer. Also, these 5 properties won't actually contribute much to meeting the town's goals for commercial space. Our calculation of the business case for the land development of these 5 lots proves that the economics aren't there. At a bare minimum, using very conservative cost estimates, a developer would need to generate a minimum revenue of $1.6 million annually to support a very modest return on their investment. We don't believe that this is a realistic expectation, and it won't be practical for any land developer to buy these properties because they won't be able to find tenants to pay the rent. One neighbor, and by the way, if that increases to 3 stories, costs just go up. One neighbor has told us that they tried to find interested developers to buy these lots and has failed to get any interest from them. So before changing our lives forever with rezoning, I request that council direct staff to investigate and report back to them and the 5 waterfront property owners with a concrete recommendation as to what land uses and businesses could possibly occupy these lands. If it's not economically viable, why do it? The staff report mentions that owners can continue existing residential use of their homes. That may be so. However, the appeal and the value of our property will be significantly reduced as soon as this rezoning happens. Even though we have one of the most beautiful homes on this street, a prospective residential buyer is going to avoid it because they could end up next to a beer hall or vaping store. That is not why they purchase lakefront homes. They will have many options just down the street from us with the same, without the same zoning complication, and that's what they're going to choose. So our street is booming and with new bills already, so why choose ours? The staff report also speaks to the Our Shore bylaw. The 5 waterfront lots already support ecologically sound and safe development, and they are the least intrusive development option to protect the Lake Simcoe shoreline. So this is not a good reason for redesignation. Once shoreline protection is gone, the developers can virtually ravage our shores with commercialization. As the staff report indicates, land use decisions made by municipalities must be consistent with provincial policy standards. The prime directive of provincial policy is managing and directing land use to achieve efficient and resilient development and land use patterns. It is not efficient to redesignate properties with million-dollar new homes on them. These properties are not appropriate use of resources. The PPS directs rezoning to be considered for brownfield sites or underutilized lots. Clearly, that is not the case here. Our home is a beautiful new dream home. Our neighbor's home is also new, and 2 other lot owners have plans to rebuild. Technically, land planners must be able to prove that their proposed land use redesignation actually conforms with provincial policy standards before placing them into an official plan. The fact that the latest OP was approved without making us fully aware, all of us, including you councillors, that our 5 properties were a part of Innisfil Beach Road commercialization doesn't make it right. It was a mistake and it should be corrected. Therefore, I request council to direct the planning staff to provide proof that they have complied with the provincial policy standards in selecting these 5 waterfront properties on Lakelands Avenue for redesignation. If not, council is obliged to remove them from the downtown redevelopment plan. Otherwise, rezoning against our wishes will be taking away our property rights without cause and without proper notice. This breaches the Ontario Human Rights Code and the Canadian Charter of Freedoms. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stanley. Next speaker will be Karen Forgrave.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. Whenever you're ready, and I'll start your timer, and I'll ask if Ms. Stanley could turn on. Thank you.
I actually have a presentation to share, but I've got the message that I cannot share it right now. So I'm waiting for permission to be granted. If we could wait before we start the timer, that would be great.
Great. And if you could, if there's a way of turning up your volume just a bit, you're just a bit hard to hear. Or is that just me?
I can talk loudly.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a bit better.
So I'm going to share my screen and see if we have now the ability to do this. Okay, can you see that now?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I will begin. So, concerns and objections to rezoning. First of all, we are concerned about the environmental impacts of the area, as has been mentioned. Innisfil Beach Road is a natural hill sloped down to the lake, and the proposed zoning changes call for drastically reduced greenery. Quotes from the proposal include minimum interior side yard of 0 meters. So basically, as we've seen, building after building, a wall of concrete facing the road. Landscape strips have been reduced to a minimum of 0 meters to make space for uses like storefront displays or pedestrian seating. And obviously that leads to increased runoff to the lake down the hill and more environmental concerns such as loss of trees, loss of shade, increased global warming in effect. Taken from our shore, May 2017, if ever a conflict arises between any plan, policy, or document, the provision that gives the greatest protection to the ecological health of the Lake Simcoe watershed will prevail. So a question is, has an environmental assessment been completed looking at the impacts of rezoning? Another concern is increased traffic to the area. Already we know that there are traffic concerns getting down Innisfil Beach Road to the park, particularly on summer weekends. Having businesses here instead of residential housing will just increase the traffic. There will also be supply trucks for businesses using the road then. It would make sense to have more commercialization west of the 25th Side Road, closer to the subdivisions and more people, closer to the highway and farther from the lake. Here's an article from the Toronto Star looking at some problems. Restaurant patios spark clashes over noise and loss of sidewalk space. We're also concerned about the impact of health on the residents, with noise pollution, increased crowds near the park and the lake, exhaust from more vehicles, light pollution, and nighttime noises from patios near residential areas. There are many studies that document the negative effects of increased noise, congestion, and increased urbanization on people's health and well-being. One example is a 2015 Toronto study that showed the higher a neighborhood's tree density, the lower the heart attack and metabolic disease, and estimated that the health boost to those living on blocks with 11 or more trees than average was actually equivalent to $20,000 more Canadian per person in terms of health and well-being overall. Again, the community planning permit bylaw says that the purpose is to maintain the residential and recreational uses along the Lake Simcoe shoreline, and Lake Simcoe exists in the public realm and provides significant ecological and social benefits. And I have pictures here of my daughter bike riding on the weekend off Hastings Avenue. There is a passageway through in the bottom right from Innisfil Beach Road. You can see how treated it is, and this is in the planned area to be changed. She's also in front of Innisfil Beach Park kayaking. So we're concerned about increased commercialization and urbanization affecting our ability to do this in the area. Again, looking at the residential lots down towards the park on Lakelands and the area we've looked at. So we're concerned that there should be green corridors linking the park on the north and other green spaces such as the one off Hastings, that we shouldn't be limiting them by putting commercial areas in between. So there are better places to build. This is Innisfil Beach Road and Webster Boulevard in 2018 on the left, and now in 2020, of course, the new strip has gone in there with commercial spaces. Avoid fragmentation. Please keep commercial zones together. Again, this is at St. John's Road with the Tim Hortons on one side on the north and a plaza on the left or the south side. Again, asking the question, is more commercial space really needed? So there are still vacancies for retail and commercial space. A year later at this complex that was built at Innisfil Beach Road and the 25th Side Road on the southwest corner, changing the landscape forever, unfortunately. But again, the red sign shows that there are vacancies still there. And again, as was mentioned, the commercial zone properties are vacant and not yet developed. So why are we looking for more? There are some examples here all along Innisfil Beach Road between the 20th and the 25th Side Road. These pictures were all taken this weekend. Also looking at commercial space turnover. This is at St. John's Road. It was Yogurties, the store in 2015, Can't Beat a Pita in 2018, and is now Shawarma Fire. So there is certainly commercial spaces that are available and a turnover rate that suggests we don't need more commercial spaces. Looking at Provincial Policy 2020 under the Planning Act that came into effect just May 1st, 2020, says new development taking place in designated growth areas should occur adjacent to existing built-up areas. And also that healthy, livable, and safe communities are sustained by avoiding development and land use patterns which may cause environmental or public health and safety concerns. Furthermore, there's a whole list in 1.8 of energy conservation, air quality, and climate change stipulations. I'll just highlight a few. It says that we should support energy conservation and efficiency, improved air quality, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and preparing for the impact of a changing climate through land use and development patterns, which promote compact form and consider the mitigating effects of vegetation and green infrastructure, and maximize vegetation within settlement areas where feasible. So again, I ask you to keep commercial space west of the 25th Side Road, where there are already lots of commercial spaces and commercial zoning. And please consider the voices of your residents. Vote against the proposed changes for rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Forgrave. And thank both speakers so far for just being just a tiny bit over the 5 minutes. Thank you, I appreciate that very much. Our next speaker is Mr. Douglas Wood. Mr. Wood, if you would turn on your video and welcome, Mr. Wood.
Can you see me?
We can see you and we can hear you. So you're good
Beautiful.
to go whenever you're ready.
So thanks for putting on this evening, Mayor Dolan. Sally and Karen have gone over, I think, a lot of the rules and regulations, the economics, the doesn't make sense to do it. And I'd like to speak briefly about the Lakelands Avenue portion. I don't know how we can say it's in the public good to take 5 existing homes, and I use the word homes. They're not buildings, they're homes, and they're back on the lake that we want to look after, and we want to change the zoning so that commercial properties or mixed use commercial can go on our lake. And I can't imagine how anyone can think that's in the public good. So I'd ask council to think about that. Karen was good enough to talk briefly about the increased traffic that commercial areas typically bring. I live on Lakelands. I walk to Innisfil Beach Park with my grandkids. The road is normally nice and quiet. As you know, a little too busy on weekends, but it's only going to get, in my opinion, way worse if we put mixed use commercial on IVR and on Lakelands Avenue. So I agree that there's a ton of space between 20th and 25th Side Road yet to be developed for commercial. I'd ask that we use that. I'd ask that you look at supplying some of the commercial space needs with your new orbit proposal, and that we leave residential as it is, residential, that we leave access to the park for pedestrians and cyclists and mom and dads with strollers and all the family stuff that we want to do in and around Innisfil Beach Park. IBR from 25th Side Road to Innisfil Beach Park, it's about a ½ kilometer in length. I can't imagine that not commercializing it is going to cause the town of Innisfil to be stagnant as far as growth, both commercially and population-wise. So again, we use terms like the public good and what the residents want and what the existing homeowners that live in the area now want. And I would ask council to consider that carefully when they vote in August on this proposed rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wood. Next is Leslie Pollock. I didn't see him on the screen. Is Deputy Clerk?
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Pollock sent a message in just a few moments ago that he was delayed and was unable to attend, but that he had provided comments. So he said thank you for the opportunity, and he will not be attending this evening.
Thank you very much. That answers my question. And yes, we did receive Mr. Pollock's comments in writing, so we've got those. So next on my list is Mr. Michael Stanley.
Hey, can you see me?
We can see and hear you. Welcome, Mr. Stanley, to our virtual town hall.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Mayor Dolan. So I want to share my screen. I have the PowerPoint here, and I'll go through it with you there. Okay, can everyone see that? Excellent. So, okay, so I just wanted to spend a little bit of time just to go over the impact of this particular decision that has had on us for the past year, year and a half, and so on, and a little bit of background as well. So we have actually been living in Innisfil for about 20 years. We started with this little cottage here, and then 7 years ago, we decided to move up here permanently. And moving here full time meant getting architectural drawings done. We showed them to the town planners. They were like so incredibly excited. It was awesome. They said, that's exactly what we want for Lakelands Avenue, that level of gentrification, all these new homes happening and so on. And we were really excited. What they didn't tell us though was the official plan was undergoing changes that might directly impact us. So we knew nothing of that. We were just told, go ahead, this is wonderful. So then a year ago, shock and dismay, oh my God, a bylaw change, residential to commercial. Where did this come from? There was no reference in the official plan. I read the over 400 pages, every single one of them. Lakelands Avenue isn't even mentioned once. On one little diagram on one page, there's a big red circle, but who would have known? We attended all of the official plan meetings. They never talked about Lakelands Avenue. This blindsided us. Our neighbors, we talked to them all. They didn't know anything about it. Our councilor didn't know. Quite honestly, we also know that as mayor, you didn't know as well. So communication obviously wasn't working between staff, residents, and council. So we went out, got a petition signed from all of the residents who knew nothing about this and didn't actually want this to move forward, and presented this to council. Last September's town hall meeting, the planners experienced a swell of anger and frustration about all of this redesignation on our properties. So the question everybody's been asking so far is why commercialization? So independent research done by a number of our neighbors with the Friday Harbor developers and other major developers all around, they're not actually interested in building here. The costs are way too prohibitive, as Sally had pointed out. The bylaw states a 2-story building, the cost to tear down expensive homes, get architectural plans done, the building permits and then build, it's onerous. And if your research differs, I wish you would share it with us, because we see no research to indicate this is a viable proposition. And then there's the negative impact on homeowners. Realtors, we've talked to them. What's the impact on us? They said, actually, in this situation, your property value is likely going to decline. Would you buy a $2 million house beside a pet store, hair salon, or a dental office, or a McDonald's? Whether it was beside you or across the street? Most people said no. So it's a double-edged sword. What they told us is a lakefront residential home is considered a risk if the redesignation goes through, because individuals don't want to have a commercial building and a parking lot right beside them. They don't want that risk. And developers aren't interested because of the prohibitive costs. So it's a double-edged sword. No matter which way, we lose. And there really is no valid precedent. At last August council presentation, one council member told us not to worry. After all, Cookstown had a similar rezoning 30 years ago, and there's still no commercial. So it raises an important question. Why did council even do it at all at that time? What were they thinking? Regardless, it really isn't a good comparison, because waterfront property is much more highly sought after and valued. Telling us nothing's going to happen for at least 30 years raises yet another question. Why destroy our lives today? The reality of commercial may never happen in any of our lifetimes. What's your urgency? And is council aware? We're told Alcona has a shortfall of 1 million square feet of commercial space. And Karen was amazing in her presentation. She touched on all of these points. Innisfil Beach Road has so much unoccupied commercial land. We've lived here for over 20 years. The same lots are still empty. In addition, approved commercial buildings aren't getting built. The northeast corner of Innisfil Beach Road and Yonge Boulevard. Large empty lot has signs indicating restaurants are going to open in the spring of 2019. Well, I think they missed that one. The apartment building at 25th and Innisfil Beach Road, they can't lease their main floor commercial space. The PharmaSafe building, unsuccessfully for 2 years now, trying to lease office space. No one is interested. The old mayor's house has been put on stilts for over 3 years. Where is the shortfall? It's not evident in Alcona. If your goal is to increase the number of empty lots and abandoned buildings, go ahead. But I don't really think that's your vision for downtown Alcona. But absolutely, you should really be looking at it before expanding. Shouldn't we be more focused on increasing green space? So what are our expectations? Stop this trial. We didn't know we did anything wrong. We attended all of the official plan meetings. We read the entire official plan and so on. And yet we're forced before council right now to defend our rights, to keep our houses residential, thereby retaining its value. You've created a huge amount of stress for us over the past year and a half. You have no idea. For what? The right thing to do is this. As the CAO said in the meeting last year, we made a mistake. Council, agree that you made a mistake. Clearly, there's no business case for this bylaw. Fix it. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. Our next presenter is Paul Seidman. Mr. Seidman?
Hello, how are you?
Very good. How are you today, sir?
Oh, I'm excellent. Thanks for inviting us to the Zoom meeting. I'm glad I figured out how to talk and listen at the same time. I've been opposed for this commercialization from the start. I don't even know how it was snuck in. And Michael's point is it was literally snuck in because as smart as I thought I was and attending meetings and reading up about official plans, I couldn't figure out that Lakelands was part of the vocabulary. And I don't understand why 5 houses are going to have any impact at all in helping, the town come up with, more nicer downtown Alcona. There's no logic in my mind other than potentially, establishing a domino effect where it's not 5 houses, it's 6. It's not 6, it's 7, and so on. Because no one really wants to live next door to anything commercial when they've lived for the last 40 years, 20 years next to homes. You assume if you're living next to a home, it's always going to be a home, especially when there's a home there now. It's not like it's vacant, vagrant land that is eyesoring and needs to be something built there. And this sounds like a great idea, which there is a lot of empty lands all the way on Innisfil Beach Road, which has properties on it that look decrepit and should be knocked down and condemned and rebuilt. But there's
Seidman,
nothing.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to give you the opportunity. I didn't know if you knew your video wasn't on. You
I don't know how to turn it on.
Oh, okay. Well, it's up to you. I just wanted to give you that option if you wanted it. It's down where your mute button is.
I don't even see a mute button, but
anyway, I'm sorry.
There we go. Okay, how's that? I hit start video. You cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
Oh, then it's our fault.
Okay, you want to start it or
yeah,
start
I
my
think
video?
So if clerk's office, there you go. You're coming on now, Mr. Seidman.
All right, I put on a clean shirt, so I'm glad you can see me now.
We can't see you. We see something, but it's not you.
Can you see me now?
There you are. Yes. Okay.
Right.
I'm sorry. I should have
Perfect.
done that right at the beginning so I didn't interrupt your flow. I apologize.
It's okay. It's okay. It's worth waiting for good things. So back to what I was saying, there's so much empty lands and properties all the way, up Innisfil Beach Road that it would make sense to develop there. I don't understand any logic in picking these 5 houses, and clearly I don't know how many of the 5 houses are looking forward to selling their properties to a developer. But my understanding is, like, take Sally as an example. She's planning on staying there. She's like in the middle, monkey in the middle. Without her property, you're not going to be able to do much with 2 or 3 of them. It just doesn't make any sense to consider what we're doing. And I think it's a mistake from the start, and it's almost one that they've dug a hole, and no one wants to say, yeah, we really made a mistake. We shouldn't be including Lakelands as part of commercialization, and let's take it off the official plan. You know, I'm all for making, you know, Alcona nice and downtown and, you know, a place to walk with your family and enjoy, you know, the summer and the winter as well. But there's no logic in taking 5 homes and turning it into land and building up commercial that's going to add to confusion, to noise, to unnecessary hardships for people that have homes and want to live there. I know we're looking to move up there eventually full time, but we don't want to live on a street, you know, next to commercial properties. I know recently, you know, 2 or 3 years ago when the Savannah properties were rubble and someone wanted to, you know, rebuild commercial, that was denied. And then someone wanted to rebuild and put 4 houses on the same property that now has 2 beautiful homes on it. That was denied. It wasn't part of the streetscape. And it doesn't make any logic sense that you're going to see 5, you know, these beautiful Yorkville-like properties at the end of the street, and then your neighbor, who's the 6th house, has to butt it or bear it. It's just not fair, and there's no consideration for what's there. And you know, the trees want to be there, and the people that live there want to be there. And I just think it's a horrible mistake, and council should rethink their thoughts on this. And that's basically all I need to say.
Thank you so much, Mr. Seidman, and I apologize for interrupting you.
It's okay. I'll send you a postcard.
Next on the list is Elizabeth Brasseur. And I saw her earlier, so I know she's on the call.
Mute. Okay. Hi, thank you for inviting me tonight.
Welcome and thank you.
I think everybody pretty well said what I'm thinking too, but my point is that we've been coming here as a cottager for over 50 years, and we now have a permanent home here, and I just so sad to see it go commercialized. We just love it up here, and it's been a family place for Mom came as a kid, and so Mom is next door to me, and we've been up here for, like I said, over 50 years, and we love Innisfil, and we just would love it to stay residential. And I'm sad that they want to make changes, and I know I love to see things done in the park that make it nicer for people, for children, like the splash park or whatever they want it to do. But we just would really like to see it stay residential. And that's about all I wanted to say tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us, and thank you for waiting so long to say your piece.
No problem.
Next is Carol Misko. Did I say that correctly? Ms. Toma?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, she did not come into the meeting this evening, and we tried to contact her but have been unable to reach her. I'd also like to advise that Mr. Navarrete had submitted comments only and did not wish to speak, so he will not be speaking this evening.
Thank you. So we did get his comments late today, I believe. And do we have comments from Ms. Misko?
Thank you, Your Worship. The town clerk will be providing those shortly once we finish this portion of the public consultation.
Okay, so I just want to thank everybody who participated. I think it went rather well. Not too many glitches. And I'm going to then ask if we have other people who wish to come back for an additional comment. And I see Ms. Stanley's back.
Can you hear me? Okay. I just want to add a few minutes of commentary. From the time we learned About our property's redesignation, Michael and I have been begging the planners to give us their reasons for redesignation. And until today, we've never received a proper answer. To bring the lake to the town is meaningless babble. It is a non-answer. Furthermore, we have been marginalized at every attempt to submit our objections. It seems ludicrous that we have to continue to beg for consideration and common sense to prevail. It is unacceptable for the municipality to place us in a vice, where you are the judges making us defend our rights, when the planners have taken away our property owner rights in the very way they have managed the official planning process itself. How would you feel if this were to happen to you? The municipality's role is to ensure planning decisions and planning documents are consistent with the PPS standards for wise management of resources. As councillors representing us, we feel it is your fiduciary responsibility to ensure that whatever you adopt is in the best interest of the people you represent, and to ensure that the municipality operates with both transparency and due diligence. It is staff's job to do things right, and it is leadership's job to do the right things. All we are asking of you today is to do the right thing for us. Remove the 5 Lakelands waterfront properties from the official plan and redesignate them back to their original residential zoning. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stanley. Thanks everybody for commenting. And I understand this is a very passionate topic, but I just feel I have to say at this time that I would stack our planning team against any in the province. They are the best and most qualified professionals that we could have ever hoped of attracting. But I will now ask that everyone has spoken. Is there anyone else who wanted a second attempt? Seeing none, then I will ask the town clerk if any emails have been received during the meeting. Was there anybody emailing in comments? Mr. Park.
Thank you, Worship. So we had one speaker who wasn't able to connect to the Zoom, Carol Misko. Her comments were around preserving green space. She would not like to allow vehicles in the park and to move the boat launch to Bellewart. And her full comments will be circulated tomorrow. We had one other email come in from Rafaela Navarrete, providing comments in favor of the proposed amendments, including needing development to support growth, to update the beach area, and to update Innisfil Beach Road with cafes and restaurants. And that's all that we've received during the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Parkin. Now I'd ask the deputy clerk if any comments or questions have been provided by phone call during the meeting.
Thank you, Worship. No, I have not received any telephone calls regarding this. However, I would like to reiterate that if any person wishes to call or submit this evening or tomorrow, we will respond and ensure that they become part of the meeting file and circulate them to all of council and town staff as well, and identify them as an interested party.
Thank you. So thanks to everyone who's taken the time to provide input regarding the proposed amendments. We will now go to the recommendation, and I would ask for a mover and a seconder, and then ask council if they have any further comments or questions. So we'll go to the recommendation, and it is on the screen. And it's basically to receive for information, and the public, the comprehensive report outlining recommendations would take into account all of the comments that were made this evening. So I would need a mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Orsatti and Councillor Fowler. Any comments or questions prior to voting on this? Councillor Orsatti.
Thank you. A couple comments. I wanted to thank many of the residents, mostly I think all from my ward, for speaking tonight. It takes a lot to express your concerns about something that you can be so passionate about in a calm manner. Clarification from planning staff. When will we are still, all these properties are under the interim control bylaw. Can we have a date as to when that interim control bylaw will be lifted?
Mr. Pierce, or sorry, Ms. Nordstrom, whoever wants to answer.
Yes, so the as it stands today, however, I'd just like to preface that the regulations have been changing over the last few months, but as of the regulations released on Monday, the date of the expiry of the interim control bylaw would be August 13th.
Any other questions, Councillor Sadi?
Just this report. So as it's been notified that it's going to take a lot for staff to put a follow-up report to council. And are we looking at August, roughly an approximate time, just in consideration ensuring that this report comes back for a vote prior to residents who live in the ward affected going back to their homes just prior to Labor Day?
Thank you, Ms. Nordstrom, although that's less complicated now that we're virtually zooming in on all of our meetings, but who knows? I might be an optimist and say we might be able to have a real meeting by August, but who knows? Ms. Nordstrom?
Yes, through you, Mayor, we are anticipating bringing back the recommendation report on August 12th in advance of that date as it stands today.
Thank you. And Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to make a couple of comments. One is that I think as those local residents who live on Lakelands, if it were my house, I would be just as angry and just as passionate as they have expressed tonight. However, as a councillor and as deputy mayor and mayor, we have to look at the future. We have to look at 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road in terms of what we want our community to become. And so I think we have to, we may not have the passion that these neighbors have. However, we have to think down the road what we want our community to have. And one thing, I've lived in Innisfil for now 33 years. And for 33 years, if I want to go have a nice retail waterfront experience, I go down downtown Barrie. I go to Grillicious. I go to all the Barrie places to go have a good meal. If I would go to Dan's, but he's not on the waterfront. But I have been there, so I do I do visit Dan. But now with Friday Harbor, I go up to Friday Harbor to sit by the water and have a really nice, innovative experience by the waterfront. Alcona has none of that, and so as we move along the sustainable path for our community, I want to be able to walk to these locations. I don't want to have to drive I don't have to drive to Barrie. I don't want to have to drive to other areas. I want to be able to walk. And I'm in walking distance from the park. I enjoy the park. I enjoy all the things of the park. So I think having some sort of retail experience down near the waterfront along IBR is I think the planners and I think people can come up with really nice friendly spots that we can truly enjoy, that visitors will enjoy and residents will enjoy. So I think we can. I don't think we're going to have McDonald's, and I don't think we're going to have all these cheap, low retail stores along the front. I think what we want to have is high retail experiences in that general area. That's what we want to have, because we want to have a Port Credit. We don't want to have a normal downtown with vape shops as was being explained to us. So I do appreciate their disappointment, and I said I would just be just as angry if it was my lot there as well. But I think it's as councillors, we have to think down the road in terms of what we potentially want to build. And I think beside the lake, I think we can build a unique experience for all residents of Innisfil, and I think that's what we'd like to see down there. And I just hope that people can see past that. And I think also too that we can revitalize the lakefront. If you go down and take a look at a few of the lots that are down there, they're concrete bases. There's no ecosystem there for fish or anything else. I think with the setbacks that we have under our shores, I think we can bring part of that back and give some livelihood to that shoreline, which is dearly missing right now. I know some of the lots are in much nicer shape. However, I was down there during the winter time, and there's a few lots which is just solid concrete, and there's concrete falling into the water. I think those areas need to be revitalized, and I think this might be an opportunity to do that. Plus, give us that retail space we'd like to have next to the lake, so that I'm not driving into Barrie to have a nice fine dinner by the lakefront. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. That I guess preludes what the debate will happen in August, and so at this point we're just receiving the report. We're asking that all of the comments tonight be considered by planning staff, and that a report with a recommendation come back to the August meeting. And at that point, we'll make sure we have a lot of time on the agenda, because I think it's going to be a healthy debate from everybody that evening.
Mayor Dolan?
I'm sorry, Mr. Wood. It's not at this point appropriate, but if you wanted to send an email to the clerk or call that number, and they'll make sure that any comments that you have will form part of the record for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
So all in favor of the recommendation to receive the report and all of the information that we received tonight from our residents? Any opposed? That's carried. Now, if you have not made oral or written submissions in regards to this proposal before a decision is reached, you should be aware that the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal may dismiss your appeal. Anyone who wishes to provide comment may do so, and may also register as an interested party to be contacted before this application is further considered by council. And you can do that by contacting clerk's office at innisfil.ca. Council thanks everyone for their participation, and council will now consider, oh, I did that wrong. Now we'll consider the recommendation, but we've already done that. So now we'll go back to the council and special council agenda, and we'll get a mover and a seconder for the confirming bylaw. Moved by Councillor Van Berkel, seconded by Councillor Eisses. Questions or comments? Councillor Waters?
Thank you, Mayor. During that discussion, one point that the Lakelands residents did bring up was the need for some sort of economic study to show that a two-story is viable. I wholly agree with them on that part. That that would be nice to be able to have some sort of report come back from staff around that piece. Although I'm in favor of what we're doing, I still think that's a good recommendation that we should have from staff. So I don't know if that's the appropriate time now to ask that.
Well, I think that it will be addressed, because that was brought up more than once, and I think that staff will take that under advisement when they come back.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that happens.
Let me just check. So Ms. Nordstrom?
Yes, through you, Mayor, we'll be taking in all the comments that we've received tonight and incorporating that into the recommendation report, including the viability question.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got a mover and a seconder for our confirming bylaw. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And finally, I just want to again thank everybody for your participation. And I know it's a little bit awkward by Zoom, but I thought it went quite well, even with the sharing the screen. And thanks again to the staff for, if you want to turn on your video so we can see you. Thank you so much for making this work tonight, and for allowing all of us to allowing so many options for people to be engaged in this process. Very much appreciated. So now I'll take a motion to adjourn, and that would be Councillor Nicol and Councillor Fowler. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy this beautiful evening and be well and stay safe. Stay safe.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Good night, everyone, and thank you to all the residents who participated.
Good night.
Okay, we're out. Good night, everybody.
Thanks, folks.
You still there, Lee? Yay!
Are we still broadcasting?
Well, yes, because Dave was gone. So the backup ones were still